Hello ladies and gentlemen, today I am going to be reviewing a bunch of movies for you guys, but I'm going to be reviewing a bunch of movies that are a part of, specifically, the Criterion Collection. If you guys don't know what the Criterion Collection is, the Criterion Collection is a collection of classic films that have been restored and distributed basically to a wider audience, basically doing repairs to films that were damaged when they were originally in their older film reel format. It's also a collection that allows for foreign films to be brought into a more contemporary world, basically. It's a North American company, and they bring these films from overseas, all around the world from different years, to try to bring them to a mass audience. And it also involves contemporary films that they believe are important for filmmaking as an art form. So, what I'm going to be doing and how I'm going to be doing this is I'm going to be reviewing the films based on when I purchased them. So I basically have a whole bunch of orders numbers. So it's going to be, the first video will be on the first order I made, and the second order, and so on. I'm also going to be talking about the films quickly, and also about the supplements that are part of the movies. Basically what the Criterion films allow and offer, aside from the film, a newly restored version of the movie, is they also allow and offer supplements to be a part of it that allow you to appreciate the film on a deeper level than just this movie was great because of these story purposes, character purposes, and the filmmaking itself. But this one takes a deeper dive into the history of the films, also the restoration process some of the times. But that's what these films are going to be. I'm only going to be doing this with this introduction for the first one. And if you guys are at all interested in checking out the later videos, I'll have those up. But right now, I'm going to be talking about the first order that I ever made on the Criterion Collection. I'm also going to be including two other films, however, because while they weren't part of the order, they were actually the first Criterion movies I bought. And there's a reason I'm going to be talking about those movies today. The first film that I ever purchased to add into my own filming collection that was a part of the Criterion was this, Frances Ha. Now, why did I buy this movie, you might ask? Well, because it had the Criterion symbol right on the side of it, and it was also $2. I bought this at my local county library, and it was very much just simply, oh, I bought it because it's part of the Criterion. Not something I recommend you do. I recommend that you look into the films before you do it to see if it's something that you might be interested in. This is a movie about a woman, played by Greta Gerwig, who's living in New York in her late 20s, and she's juggling being kind of a poor artist and going around. This was one of those examples of the movies that I was not a fan of. And it's one of those films that when I'm watching it, I'm like, I don't get why it's part of the collection. And watching the supplements, there's a discussion that they have where the filmmakers wanted to create films that were reminiscent of films like Manhattan. You know, they filmed this film in black and white, and they wanted it to have that kind of feel of Manhattan and everything. The film that actually most recently reminded me of, that I just recently saw, that is part of the Criterion Collection, it reminds me of The 400 Blows by Francois Truffaut. And that movie was very, very well crafted, but it kept me at a bit of a distance. This is a movie that I feel the filmmakers are trying to put more meaning in something that there really is. Don't get me wrong, it's a story that I think a lot of people can relate to, but I also think it's a movie that's trying to put more importance on itself than is really deserved. It's not necessarily one I recommend. It's more of a movie I recommend you rent. Or check out of a library, but not necessarily one to purchase. So I'm glad I have it for $2, but this is one I probably, if somebody was interested in buying it, I'd definitely just give it out to them, because it's not really one that you need to own. The next film, however, is one that I do recommend that you purchase, and that is My Dinner with Andre. Again, $2. This film, I actually watched it on YouTube for the first time, and the reason I watched it and I was looking for it was because of the Community episode, My Dinner with Abed. I watched this movie, and it was one that I put on in the background when I was just doing stuff, and I started listening to it, and I listened to the conversation that Andre Gregory and Wallace Shawn are having, and I fell in love with this movie. It was one of those films I actually felt bad that I was putting it on in the background and like I wasn't paying attention to it. So once I watched it on YouTube, I was trying to like find it, and seek it out, and lo and behold, it was there in the library, and I just grabbed it, and I looked around, made sure nobody else was looking at me, because I was really intense about this film. It was such a brilliant movie, and it's about Wallace Shawn and Andre Gregory having a conversation in a very fancy restaurant, and the conversation that they're having, discussing family, discussing society, discussing theater, discussing art. However, it's non-pretentious. It also is a very interesting film to pay attention to who the individuals are. Knowing that Wallace Shawn and Andre Gregory are middle class kind of white men in New York City having this kind of discussion actually means something. It isn't just simply two guys just talking. There's more to it than them just discussing. They're talking about their own insecurities. They're talking about their fears, the things that they love, and that structure is something that is so difficult, I think, for anyone to do nowadays, because I don't think we trust our own language sometimes. And I think this movie is a testament to how much language we can pull from our own language, English. And not even just English, just if anybody's having a conversation with anybody, there's so much to be had in that. There's this moment where Andre talks about what we need, or what he believes we need, is a new language. And this was filmed in the 1980s, and if you've noticed, like nowadays, in 2010s, language has changed dramatically. Like, in the last decade, it has changed, it's shifted. All of a sudden, how we communicate with each other is very different. I don't think that's exactly what he's talking about in that film, in this movie, and I actually think we're still taking steps backwards to isolating ourselves. And this movie is one of my favorite films of all time, especially post-1970s, and I think it's a movie that everyone should see at least once. Everyone. Whether you be in the theater or whether you just be a normal person, just like working a normal job, because it's one that helps us, we can relate to what they're talking about, the fears that they have, and yeah, I just recommend you guys check it out. Now I'm going to go into the few films that I did purchase on my first order of the Criterion Collection. This was a very small order because I was very hesitant. I wanted to be very particular. I bought 3 films, but one of the films I bought was a gift for my parents, so I won't talk about that movie. It was City Lights, but I haven't seen it yet. So I will talk about the first movie. This is actually the movie that made me want to purchase this film. There's always one film in every single order that makes me go, I'm going to start buying a bunch of movies. And the movie that was Eyes Without a Face. This is a French horror film from 1959. I almost said 1960. It is... How do I put this? It is a very intelligent horror film. In fact, it's one of the most intelligent horror films I've ever seen. It's very, very much character reliant, which I love. It's very much a movie about emotion and people feeling guilty about situations. It's all about this man, a doctor, who is trying to reconstruct his daughter's face. She was horribly scarred in an accident. And I won't talk about the accident, but he's trying to reconstruct his daughter's face using skin grafts, basically. I won't say how. This was the movie that when I saw it, and like the cover itself is actually kind of scary. Like there's this beautiful, like sharp white frame here that's flat, and yet in the background it's all fuzzy and it's just really unsettling. Yet it's beautiful. This is a very beautiful film, and it's very quiet, very patient. Not shocking, but it's got very shocking moments to it. When you think about horror nowadays, you don't see this anymore. It's a very patient film. It's similar to Psycho, where Psycho is a lot more terrifying, I believe. This movie is a lot more somber and a lot more... It's a lot more personal. It's trying to be more empathetical towards the situation of all the characters. The thing that really surprised me about this film were two things, especially on the supplements. There's a interview with the director, and they actually talk about how it was released in America. It was released as a 2-film, like, kind of... It was released in those theaters that release 2 films at a time, where you, like, watch a double feature. And it was released, I think it was a Grindhouse film. It was released with a movie called... what is it? It's not The Manhunter. It was... The Man Mutant, or something like that. Manster. It was called Manster, which was a exploitation. Man has his regular body and a monster head, like, growing on the side of his neck, and, like, he's just chasing people. And that was released. It was even retitled. What was the title of it called? The Chamber of Dr. Faustus, or something like that. Yeah, it's not listed on here, but the Chamber of Dr. Faustus, I believe it was called, and just awful trailer to release your film. It was terrible marketing to get anybody interested in it. I'm surprised people... I don't even think it was really seen, but it was shown in the exploitation horror category of the 50s, and I tell you, it was even cut. Like, the film was cut down so that the less empathetical and personal moments that would make you care about the Doctor as a character were cut, so that he was more of a marketable horror villain. Like, it was... thinking about it was awful. The second thing, though, on the supplements that really got me was a documentary that was made in 1949 by the director about French slaughterhouses, which is terrifying. It's very graphic, very grotesque. However, it's filmed in black and white. You see horses, you see sheep, you see cows and calves being skinned, beaten, chopped up, basically for food and for meat. And I've never felt more shocked and just appalled, but also fascinated at the same time. And he even talked about the choice to make it black and white was a choice because he didn't want it to be grotesque and too vile that people couldn't see it. People, like, he was criticized. It's like, why didn't you shoot this in color? And he's like, because if I shoot it in color, nobody's going to want to see it. Because then you're just seeing gushes of blood, come out of a horse, and that's not something he wants to show. He wants people to see the treatment of these animals, but he also wants to let them know that it is this horrifying. He doesn't want to hold back. The horse retracting, seeing a horse fully retract, that's an image that will stay with me for a long time. And now for the other film. This was an impulse buy, one of the first ones, and I bought it for one reason only. It's the first ever Charlie Chaplin film I purchased. The only one I own. No, actually I have other ones. The Great Dictator. And this is the only film off of the Criterion that I own for Charlie Chaplin. And if you don't know what The Great Dictator is about, maybe this will inform you a little bit. This is a movie that satirizes the fascist regime and the rise of Hitler, basically, in Germany. And this film was filmed in 1940. So this is when World War II, America was not a part of World War II, but there were still American sympathizers. So it was I believe it was criticized in America kind of for that. This was a movie that, watching it's don't get me wrong, it is hilarious. Like, this is a funny mix of slapstick comedy, of dialogue comedy, and while the dialogue is a little, not necessarily, no, it's witty. It's still witty to this day. And Chaplin mixes, this is his first ever talking picture, which was one of the reasons I wanted to get it. But the fact that Chaplin had such a great understanding of when to use dialogue and when to use slapstick comedy to a great effect is really impressive. He plays a Jewish barber in this film, and Adnoid Hinkle, who's Hitler-like, but he's not showing any Nazi propaganda. It isn't like even the images of this. There's no swastikas. It's X's. He's purposefully showing that this is a satire and not just taking the Nazi images and praising and using the Nazi symbols basically to praise him or anything like that. Like when he's doing this, like he waves off people and he does it, but he does it in the vein of his character. He's not Hitler. He's Adenoid Hinkle. There's even a character who is brilliant. He spoofs Mussolini, but he's I forget his name, but he's not Mussolini. The one thing I would say with this movie, it's about 2 hours long, and the runtime kind of becomes apparent. It doesn't drag though. You just are aware that this movie is. You're like, huh, this is actually kind of long. And I noticed because I was watching it at like 10 p.m. and then at 12, basically at midnight, and somebody said, "Oh boy, I don't know if I'm going to be able to stay this long." And I get that it's a longer film, but the reason I purchased it and the reason that I still watch it and the reason I love this movie is the ending speech at the end. Just at the end twice. No, it is a amazing speech. One that it still resonates today. I was watching this movie with conservative people who are politically conservative, and yet they resonated with the words and they said that was a brilliant speech, and they even said it's a speech for everyone. It's not just for political liberals, political conservatives. It's a speech for anyone, right, left, center, anybody. And I think what's so great is it was actually that speech was actually people said that was out of character for that person. I'm like, what are you talking about? It's the first time the main character, the Jewish barber, actually steps up and has to. Like the setup for it is so brilliant. It's so funny, and yet he takes this moment to not tell a joke, but to genuinely speak to the people. The one thing I will say with the film, though, is that there's a cheer at the end of it, which, okay, I get it. It ends the film very well, but it's one of those situations where I'm like, if it was just silence, I think it would have just punctured through. And I only say that because, Charlie Chaplin was a master of silent cinema, and if he did that, I think it would have been like he's utilizing both silence and sound to the best of their ability. But yeah, it's a really great film, and that's one where I think a lot of people should definitely look into the Criterion Collection. Thank you guys so much for watching this first video. I'm going to be getting the next few up right away for you guys. I hope you guys check those ones out. Thank you so much for watching. Take care.